Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Yidlan and I'm joined by my lovely, good-looking friend and co-host Jeremy Tussia. What is happening?
I'm well, mate. Thanks for the humbling comments, and I'm very happy to be joined by you, my other very good-looking friend as well. So,
Fuck, we're narcissists.
no, it's good. It's good if we're not telling each other how we feel, then who is going to tell us? So like we said,
Our mothers.
yeah, it's probably it.
It's true.
Anyways, I'm well, mate, and I'm feeling very relieved. I finally finished all my placements for physiotherapy, so yeah, it's like another thing ticked off, and I'm looking forward to just wrapping it up over the next month entirely, and can sniff that summer breeze coming along. So yeah, I'm well, mate. How are you?
I'm well too. Well, first of all, congratulations. Finishing
Thank you.
placement, that's a massive achievement in and of itself. So you
Thank
must
you.
be absolutely buzzing.
Yeah.
The summer breeze is coming in. I finished my uni semester this week as well. So definitely cause for celebration. And for our lovely VCE students who listen and use this as their stress relief, keep pushing through. It's nearly done. Trust me, the promised land is only a couple of weeks away. So just hold on. And the ATAR, we could probably do an episode about the ATAR and whether it matters much. But in all seriousness, just do your best. And that's all that matters.
Exactly right. And I think part of being in VCE is just the notion of pushing yourself as far as you can go, essentially, and just trusting yourself that you'll give it your best shot. And look, it sounds cliche, but those were the words that really just got me through in the end. I mean, I played around that much with ATAR calculator in the common room from the start of the year to the end of the year, but really at the end of the day, the basics is what matters, and those basics just being put in the effort, give it your best shot, and the rest will take care of itself. And I'm sure all of you have been doing that, and that's all you can do.
And that's all that matters. But for you guys who just want a bit of a distractor, maybe whilst you're going on a walk to take care of your self-care, we have an episode today about why the grass is not always greener. So Jeremy, what does that mean?
Well, the grass is greener is a common saying that we often hear, and it's the belief that there is potentially a more favorable situation than the one that you currently might be in, or the belief that maybe someone is doing better than what you believe you're doing perhaps, or the belief that you might be better off for opting for a different situation than the one you are currently in.
Yeah, I mean, we're humans, right? We're always going to be looking at things that we don't have. We have a bias for that. We'll be way more likely to look at the things that we don't have rather than the things that we do have. And then we'll love to rationalize why our current situation is poor and why we are desiring a new situation. And that can be a bit of an illusion at times, and we'll get into all of that. But I think there's good theoretical basis as to why it happens, and there's a bit of evolutionary psychology on this topic. And this is a very, very interesting notion here, which is that when we were living, in ancestral days, when food was scarce, when things were scarce, we had a psychological mechanism built into us where we were always constantly wanting to desire more resources, whether it be food, whether it be mates so we could have more children, whether it could be shelter. So tell me, how does that impact now cause, or how's that related to the grass is greener?
Well, I think it's nice to think about it from the psychological perspective and rather the ancestral perspective. And reading that made me feel better about the whole concept, because often we think we shouldn't feel like the grass is greener, but reading that made me feel like, you know what, it's quite natural and it's innate in us as humans to feel that way. You spoke about the seeking of resources from, originally being in times of scarcity and having to seek those resources for our survival. And that's exactly like what we're doing in our lives when we're essentially seeking an opportunity that we think might be better than the one we're currently in. It's the belief that what we're currently feeling right now might just not be enough for us, whether that's from a perspective of friendship, from a perspective of maybe the relationship we're in, maybe the materials that we have. It's built into us to feel like we need to seek out and seek more. And that can come with its pros, that can also come with its cons.
I mean, I like to think about it like this way. The human brain and the human body, we almost, just like a computer, we can download a bunch of software and hardware, right? Hardware being, what's built with, but the software is the programs you are downloading. And as humans, our software was acquire more resources, because acquiring more resources meant that your chances of survivability increase.
Exactly.
But like any software that you download, there might be unintended consequences to this. And in the modern world where everything's so industrialized, where everything's so globalized, our brains cannot compute the amount of options we have. So whilst we might be able to acquire one thing, we'll always be hungry for more. We spoke about, I think last week or maybe a few weeks ago, like the whole idea of options of like paralysis by choice, especially with dating apps, right? You can just go on a dating app, keep swiping. And even if you land on someone that you might actually be a good potential partner for you, based on, those cool little descriptions of where they're holding the fish in the hand, the fishing trip, you might start thinking, well, there's someone else there. I might be missing out on this. I'll be listening to music on the radio sometimes not on my Spotify. Sometimes I'll be, flicking across FM, especially with my girlfriend, and I'll hit on a song, right? And she's like, why do you keep changing the station? I thought we liked the song. And I think to myself, why do I consistently feel this need to keep switching the station? Because I'm thinking there could be potentially something better off.
There could be a better track, a better banger that you're missing out on.
Correct, exactly. Instead of listening to Taylor Swift, who I'm not really a big fan of, what if like the weekend?
What if
the weekend's playing? Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I've always conceptualized it, is that unintended consequence. We're developed to acquire more and more resources, but what happens in a world where we have so many resources and we don't have the time or energy to acquire all of it? That's where the greener grass concept comes. Grass is always green on the other side concept comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And often with the grass is greener concept comes social comparison. So that's also something that ancestral humans did. They naturally compared themselves to others. They compared themselves to others for a means of survival. Comparisons to others meant comparing resources that they had versus what other people have.
Bob over there has a better cave.
Yeah.
He has more resources to fight off that saber-toothed tiger. Bob's just cooler than me.
Exactly. And ultimately they compared because it impacted their chances of survival, what they needed to acquire in order to survive. And it's just like our lives today in a way. Today we might live in big cities perhaps, but we come in contact with that many people. We're all trying to acquire different jobs. We're all trying to acquire popularity, friends, partners, status, whatever it may be.
How many partners are you trying to acquire, my friend? In a monogamous society.
Yeah, look, I'm very happy in a monogamous relationship, but to each their own. But ultimately, with where we're at in the world right now, population is increasing. So acquiring resources, acquiring jobs is only going to get harder for all of us. And, by doing this, we naturally have to compare ourselves to others in order to compete, in order to survive, in order to be happy with where we're currently at. And this, this consequently increases our tendency to just be a little bit dissatisfied with what we have and ultimately craving more. So thinking back to ancestral human periods is quite comforting when thinking about why we compare, why we try to seek for more, and why essentially the grass is greener concept might not be such a detrimental thing, but within reason to an extent. And this is what we're going to jump into next, and provides a perfect segue, because the grass is greener is actually classed as a syndrome called the grass is greener syndrome, or GIGS for short. So we'll shorten it to GIGS. Reminds me a bit of Ryan Giggs, but we'll call
Ryan
it
Giggs. I was going to say it's niche, but that's not niche.
Oh, is it Ryan or Will? Will Griggs.
No. Ryan Giggs was the Manchester player.
I'm thinking Griggs.
Will Griggs is the he was Will Griggs on fire.
Yeah. But GIGS. All right. So the signs of GIGS, signs of grass is greener syndrome.
So there's a few of these, but as you just touched on, excessive comparison, keeping up with the Joneses. Those new neighbors have just moved in and they've got that fancy new plasma screen TV. Plasma screen TV, as if that's a new thing that everyone's.
That's something that's going to impact your chances of survival.
Yeah, like 15 years ago, that was the getting those Blu-ray DVDs because that you could watch high def quality.
Yeah.
Everything's on a streaming service.
Maybe they've got the new Tesla car which you don't have.
Yeah, true. They've got a bit of funding Elon Musk's pockets, and I don't have that. But true, social comparison. This one's very interesting. It's running away from things that require your commitment. So that's not just the relationship context, but that's also settling into a job, your friendship. And that could actually link to a bit of anxious attachment style, which is a whole episode in and of itself. But the feeling constant seeking of attention and validation.
Yeah. So essentially if we're someone that is constantly fearing commitment and running away from things that we have, that's a sign of...
That's more avoidant, but I feel like...
Grass is greener syndrome.
Yeah, I feel like... Especially those who are avoidant, specifically, like if you fear commitment, you're fearing yourself committing to something because it's going to forego the opportunity of you getting a better situation, whether it's a better relationship, a better job. So that's one thing. And then constant complaining is an interesting one, because does that say more about your desire to get into a new situation, or does that say more about of why you don't like your current situation? Because there's going to be situations where you actually don't mind it. You're comfortable, and we'll speak about that after, but more to do with does that say more about the fact that you want something better or more so that you just hate your own situation?
Yeah, look, I reckon with the constant complaining, it probably talks more about your lack of gratitude, which is another sign of grass is green syndrome in itself. But, if you're constantly complaining, you're not present in the moment, you're not happy with what you have, you're always seeking something else, and linking as well to the excessive comparison, it probably goes hand in hand because you're constantly comparing to others in a destructive way. You're going to be constantly complaining about what you currently have or don't have. Yeah,
good point. I don't have any disagreements with that. I think also just preoccupation with the future doesn't help as well.
Yeah.
That's definitely a symptom. If all you can think about is how shit things are now, but the tonic for that pain is just thinking about how good things will be, in years gone by, weeks gone by.
It's easy to think about that, if you're in a job as well, you're constantly fantasizing about what could be. You're happy in the job that you're currently having, but you're not ecstatic about it. You're thinking, well, I'm 25 years old and I could be doing more, and you're fantasizing about the future too much. That's probably a sign of, essentially feeling like the grass is always greener rather than focusing on what you have now and trying to better that to make it a better grass paddock that you're currently in.
Yeah, it's true. And I feel like this is somewhat similar to what we spoke about a few weeks ago when we said, don't wait for the future to be happy. You can give yourself permission in the present to be happy. But this is way more pervasive. This is you're genuinely hating your situation, or your situation that you're currently in isn't serving you. Yeah. And that's important. And we'll talk about ways to actually disentangle when it is that the grass may actually be potentially greener, and times when it's not. But being perfectionistic, how does that link in with gig?
With gig? Well, say your partner tries to do their best for you, but it's never enough to satisfy. There's always something more that you feel like your partner is asking of you, but deep down that you're giving things your best shot. It's the belief that potentially there's always a focus on the imperfections rather than idealizing what's great about the person, what's great about the relationship, what's great about the job that you're in. The world's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's so true. Nothing that we experience within ourselves or within a working environment is going to be perfect. But that's fine. And I think it's realizing that that's fine, which will then make you feel happy and satisfied in the the relationship or the environment that you might be in. Because ultimately, we should be thinking about, well, what is so great about the relationship we're in or the job that I'm in? Because can guarantee you, if you're in it, there are definitely things that you like about it. Like, it'd be rare if you were in a long-term relationship or something that you absolutely hated through and through. There's definitely things that you love about that. So thinking about and idealizing the strengths rather than focusing on the small imperfections is crucial when feeling happy and satisfied in the situation you might be in. And if you catch yourself always thinking about, well, what are the imperfections? What are those little 5%ers that aren't fulfilling me or making me feel some sort of fantastical way? Then you might be essentially suffering from this whole notion of grass is greener and thinking that, the world needs to be perfect and I need to be in a perfect relationship, which is extremely detrimental because that's not how it works and that's not how relationships work. And, the true value and happiness in a job, in a relationship with yourself even, is realizing that you're not perfect and that things aren't going to be perfect, but there are so many things that do make it perfect in its own way.
It's true. I think it's hard though. You're going to struggle at times to actually disentangle when the grass is genuinely greener and when it's not. When is it that your own anxieties are getting the better of you and diluting your concept of objective reality? So we thought, you and I, we thought about a couple situations where the grass actually may be greener. So friendships being one of them. Explain that a little bit for me.
Yeah, well, we've all been through friendship groups. We've started off in friendship groups in primary school, then graduating that to secondary school friendships. And then, you're moving out of secondary school and you got your uni friendships maybe. And as we go through the lifespan, our hobbies might change, our friendship groups might change. But, you might be in a friendship group that deep down, isn't getting the best out of you. Maybe your interests don't align like they once did. Maybe your friends that you made during high school, they just want to still go out clubbing and getting on the piss every Saturday night and drinking lots and staying out to the early hours of the morning and having sloppy Sundays. But you just want to take things back a little bit. You want to prepare yourself for the week. You want to go out and be productive on that Sunday. You might want to go for a run. You might prefer to stay in. And your friends might not like hearing that from you. They might think that you're the Debbie Downer of the group. They might give you a little bit of flack for it. And those are moments where the grass may actually be greener. And you might come to know that deep down that maybe this friendship group isn't right for you anymore. It's not servicing you in the way that, it might have in the past. And that's fine. That's part of maturing. That's part of changing. That's part of developing ourselves as people and in friendships groups, is that, there are always going to be past memories that you would have shared with these people that are fantastic and they brought so much happiness and fun out of you and out of situations. But people change, we develop, life changes, and it's okay to move on. And this is a time period where, if those things are happening and, your ideas are changing, but those in your friendship group are, they're not changing and they might be actually bringing you down for wanting to change. That's a perfect example of where the grass actually may be greener and there might actually be better people out there for you than the ones that you're currently hanging out in.
I suppose that same logic would apply in a relationship where there's a discord between your actual values and your partner's values and maybe your future aspirations. For example, if you want kids and they do not want kids, if you want to get married and they don't want to get married, if you want to go travel, they don't want to go travel. If there's this massive kind of shift in what you want and they want, well, yeah, realistically, the grass will be greener because they don't align with what you want. It's the same thing with the friendship example.
Yeah.
If you want to live a life that's true to yourself, you want someone that can help you and foster you and not be an obstacle towards that, right? And I think in those cases, if you do have that feeling of, I'm comfortable, but I know that there's this kind of discord between what I want and what they want, well, sure, you can really delude yourselves into thinking maybe I can change that person and whatnot, but truthfully, the grass is going to be greener because you're more likely to find someone else who does align with what you want, and you'd be giving yourself and that person every bit of fairness and opportunity by, leaving that relationship or leaving that friendship group. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants different things, and you're better off surrounding yourself around people that want similar things to you.
Yeah, I don't think we can change people as much as we'd maybe hope that we could. I think ultimately we can give people advice. We can tell them our perspectives, how we perceive scenarios and situations, how it affects us and our feelings. But in terms of the decision making, that's always just going to be on the person. That's not something that you can do. You can't make the decision for them. And that's sometimes the downfall with advice. And I think even as being a male and as a man, because as a man, sometimes we're very like solution based and solution oriented. We want to like try fix things. We want to if we're presented with a problem, we want to fix it. We want to present with a solution. But sometimes we're not going to be able to do that. If it's with ourselves, definitely you can do the work for yourself and actualize a plan to bring that solution forward for yourself. But when it comes to other people, you can't fix them. You can't change their beliefs and their personality. That's something that's up to them, and that's something that might be innate as well.
I mean, you shouldn't want to change it as well. You want to respect their autonomy. If they want to live the life that's true to themselves and you might disagree with it, so be it. Let them do their thing. You do your own thing. Something I do want to touch on, though, is there's going to be times when you're in a relationship or not you specifically, but people in general who may have grown up in very chaotic environments with love and caregivers. And they may have been really used to extreme highs and extreme lows with their caregivers. And that tends to translate into that person attracting partners who might be toxic in nature. They might be abusive. They might be individuals who, you experience the highest of highs with them, but then you experience the lowest of lows because of arguments. And then there's no kind of default baseline of stability. So all you're used to and what your nervous system is kind of used to is this consistent back and forth between intense shifts. And that can be addictive, especially if that's what you've grown up with. And it's interesting. I've heard, stories where people have ended up, who've grown up in really chaotic environments. They've had past partners who were manipulative, who were toxic. And they've gone into a relationship with someone who is very stable, who doesn't want to argue. If they've got a disagreement, they'll solve it on the spot. But that argument and that partner may be perceived as boring, or that relationship might be boring. And then you ask them, well, what is it that's necessarily boring about this relationship? And they'll say there's no there's no edge to it. If you really get down to it, it's just there's no high highs and there's no low lows.
No spontaneity,
Exactly, there's no spontaneity of that emotion.
That's what they just put it down
Potentially,
to.
exactly. But it's not. And if all they were, and then you ask them, well, what was your previous partners like and what fulfilled you about them? And they say, well, yeah, look, although they cheated, although they manipulated me, although they may have been even violent, it was at least exciting with them. But then you ask them, okay, well, what's wrong with your current partner? Well, yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with him. He's got a stable job. He's incredibly respectful. There's, a bunch of green flags that you'd look for. But then you ask them, well, is potentially the fact that you don't like given the fact that you don't have the opportunities, whether it's like kind of good and bad, constantly low and high, potentially that might be a good thing. It might be that that's like the default and that's what you're used to. The reason I'm bringing this idea up in reference to the whole grass is greener concept is that even in that case, you might start thinking, well, far out, maybe the grass is greener on the other side if I leave this relationship, this stable relationship that might be boring. And that's where it's important to actually look at the situation you're in and be really brutally honest and be objective and use your gut instinct to almost guide you in this case. But you ask yourself, by leaving this situation, am I making a poor rational decision? And obviously we're humans, we're guided by emotions, but to the best of your ability, understanding if whether you're leaving the situation you're in is actually going to be a benefit to you rather than just an emotional impulse, which is what many people do when they want to try and chase that grass is greener concept. They make impulsive decisions, is actually sitting down with yourself and understanding the motivation and understanding why you'd want to leave your current situation for something better.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
That can be applied to even things like going shopping, wanting to buy the new pair of shoes, wanting to buy that new expensive bag. Sometimes we just act based on impulse, like you perfectly said there, in terms of relationships and friendships, wanting to just jump around constantly because of that initial urge, that adrenaline, that impulse that we feel. But, sometimes we just need to give ourselves time, and journaling is a really good tool for that. Actually putting it on paper can help you rationalize as to whether these thoughts are true or whether it's just an impulse decision. And it allows you to just take a breather, quell that impulse that you're feeling, and just have a time of self-reflection. And I think in terms of thinking about whether the grass is greener and whether you should actually actualize on that, because we mentioned that, the grass may be greener in some circumstances, but I think by asking yourself, what I'm feeling now, is this going to make me happy? Am I going to be more fulfilled if I jump to something else, if I change my situation? Is it going to improve my happiness? Is it going to cause me to have long-lasting happiness? These are the types of questions that might allow you to actually rationalize as to whether it's a good decision for you to change.
It's true. And there's this thing called the region beta paradox, and I really like it. But I want
Shout out to Chris Williamson.
Oh, far out. He's daddy. I love Chris Williamson.
Where we heard this first.
Yeah, but it's an interesting one. Do you want to explain it?
Yeah, well, so as Chris beautifully said himself, the region beta paradox is where you would, well, let's just dive into it. I was going to try, just sum it up in my own way, but I think it's actually important if we just go step by step what it is and then actually explain it. So the region beta paradox says, if you were to go a mile or less, you would walk it. But if you were to go more than a mile, you would probably drive it. And paradoxically, you would go 2 miles quicker than you would go 1 mile. So what does this mean? It means that sometimes worse situations can actually be better because they can actually galvanize us into making a change. Or comfortable situations may be better because then, a change will be galvanized rather than being in that complacent situation.
I love this analogy, or rather this concept so much, because first of all, it's just interesting because you look at so many people in life and they're comfortable. They live comfortable lives, but if you ask them if they're truly fulfilled, nah. Have they lived a life true to themselves? Nah. They're just doing things to pay the bills. They're comfortable though, right? There's nothing they're not in pain. Nothing's bad per se, but they're not living in their most truest potential. Yeah. What you said there is really interesting. You'll need that situation to deteriorate for you to actually become galvanized to take some action. I've seen it so many times even in my own relationship, like my first relationship, but even in other situations, like other people's relationships where they were really comfortable for maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years. But, even us friends would, we wouldn't ever want to shit talk, but we'd say we'd ask, do you reckon this person's truly happy? Do you think are they happy or are they just comfortable? Because there's a difference. And only when the relationship really worsened and maybe someone did something bad that they were like, you know what? It took that bit of discomfort, not just discomfort, but for that situation to really deteriorate for them to do any bit of action.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can you can be in a partnership with someone for 10 years. You might be comfortable, but there might be a little bit of behaviors that when you're comfortable, you're not, it's almost in your it's in your blind spot. You don't detect it, but over time they compound, atomic habits.
Yeah.
And then over time, these behaviors culminate into a situation where you're not happy and you're no longer comfortable. You're in that shit situation where you're just emboldened and you're actually motivated to do something.
Yeah, exactly. That example of, being in a relationship that you're just comfortable in, but it's not enough to actually make you make a change to get out of it until something bad happens is a perfect example. And another great example of region beta paradox is, say you're in a job and you're considering leaving. This is something that is so relevant to our 20s. It might be that first job. You're 22, 23 years old. You've got that first job, that 9 to 5 job, and you're in that job and, you're happy you've got that job, you've got a stable income, your boss isn't that much of a flog, you know, you've got good hours, you're well respected, but you're not truly happy in the job. You feel like you're kind of just going with the flow, riding the wave, and you're not truly happy. You're a bit complacent, you're a bit comfortable. You would essentially be better off in a worse situation. And this would essentially then galvanize you to make that change and to make that job change, which might be scary, but that's what it is. That's that whole notion of Regent Beta paradox where, you know, when you're in that worst situation, that potentially scary situation, that's where true change is essentially made.
You know what I also think of? Those people who make insane body transformations. Like you'll have people who are just like, you know, consistently skinny or like skinny fat, but then someone who, you know, wasn't happy with their weight, they decide they're in an awful situation and then they just transform themselves. Not even into just like a healthy body weight, but they just look like an athlete, like a Division 1 athlete. And that's the Regent Beta paradox for you. It required them to be at that point of discomfort where they hated how they looked for them to pursue an incredible transformation. But yeah. Exactly
right. There's a million and one examples we can go into, but yeah, hopefully those are a few that you guys can relate to and can actually really nicely explain that Regent Beta paradox.
But just kind of expanding on the job thing is that I'll be honest, like my first part-time job, I remember I was green, as the old term would say. I was inexperienced, I was fresh, but the job was really good because it taught me sales skills. It was medical retail and I was able to develop a lot of skills like sales, customer service, working under high pressure situations. But there were a lot of perks that I, you know, disregarded. I used to think a lot that this was back, you know, when I got my first job, that I'd be better off going to another job. I'd hear my friends talk about how easy their job was, how, you know, it was comfortable, you know, and I desired that. I didn't want a job where I felt like I was stressed. And that was just me being, you know, a little bit of a wuss. That was me not realizing that there were a ton of skills that I would gain by simply staying there. I remember, credit to my colleague at the time, he said to me, "You don't know what you have until it's gone." And that was even after I explained to him why, you know, I'd see myself moving. And he said, "Well, you can fix all these things that you're maybe uncomfortable with now, but don't you see that it's developing you into a more kind of competent individual? Forget this job. The skills you learn here are going to be great regardless of where you go." Obviously, it wasn't a grad job. It was a part-time job fresh out of school. But I just didn't like the fact that I felt it was too hard for someone of my age, which is just stupid. I was looking for an easy excuse to kind of disqualify my, you know, the fact that I was in an uncomfortable situation. And thank God I did listen to him, because 2 years later I stayed on and then I moved on to a job that was a bit more relevant to what I was studying. So it was like a natural evolution. But man, I had some serious gig at the time. And I knew that by me leaving, it would have been almost disingenuous. I could have phrased it, well, yeah, look, I'd be better off doing this and that, and I would have rationalized it, but my gut instinct would have told me, well, you just cowered out of the situation. You decided to leave when you could have stayed. So I'm glad I didn't kind of fall on that grass is greener solution, because honestly now it's taught me a lot of things, like being able to communicate more effectively, how to sell a product if I ever need to. Number 3, also being able to work under high pressure situations, and also, and this is the biggest one, being comfortable in situations where I'm not familiar with, and, you know, having to bullshit my way through something. It's a vital skill through life. You know, if you want to develop your bullshitting skills, there's only one way to do it. So I'm going to say thank you to my colleague at the time, but it's true. What about you? I remember you had a bit of gig when you were in school.
Yeah, I think when I think of my time experiencing grass is greener syndrome was definitely when I was in year 8, year 9. It was that period in school where there's maturity fluctuations. You know, you've got your friends, but then there's also those people in the classroom, in the schoolyard, that are trying to bring you down. You know, it's common in every school, I think, and just part of going through those puberty years. You know, emotions are running high, levels of testosterone and hormones are running high, and there's just animosity and there's maturity differences. And, you know, I had that desire then, you know, well, maybe if I move schools, everything will be fixed. You know, none of this will happen. I won't be dealing with these people trying to bring me down in the schoolyard, and I'm just going to be around a new bunch of people and everything's going to be great. I soon realized that although I didn't move schools, I stayed where I was. And I stayed where I was because I trusted that, I had great friends where I was. I had core people there. And I just needed to essentially water that grass where I was and absolutely put all of my undivided attention into the people that mattered most to me and try my best to not worry about those people trying to bring me down. And going into year 9 and then into year 10, that's what I did. If there was people still trying to give me flack and bring me down, I would either laugh it off or, it would still hurt. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that comments were made that didn't hurt me and bring me down, because of course they did. When you're 14, 15, we're all very easily hurt at that age, and things did bring me down. But, when you've got great people that you can confide in and great friendships to confide in, then you've got a blessing there, and that blessing should be utilized. And that's what I did. I confided in those closest to me. I watered that grass where I was, and I was so happy for the long term in school and going into my final years of high school, because it only bolstered my sense of belonging, and it bolstered just the love and appreciation that we had amongst our friendship group, which we still have today, because we all went through that at some stage in our schooling. We all had that desire to run or to hide or to jump and find that better situation that we thought was better in our minds, just because it was different. But, you soon realize that it's not better. Where you're at is actually probably fucking great. And for me, it was. And I just had to water that grass and make it greener for where I was.
So you've just touched on the amazing solution, which is, the grass will be greener where you water it. And that's the truth of it. Now, is that an absolutist statement? No. Because there'll be situations where no matter how much you water your grass, it will still stay yucky. It will not color itself more green. And you might ask yourself, and you might tell yourself, well, I've done all I can. And if you've done all of that and you've actually been honest with yourself, then potentially only in those cases you can allow yourself, you should almost feel guilt-free at that point, because you've done everything to try and better your current situation. But then, you've given yourself every right you've given yourself every right to explore and see what else is out there. And that's kind of the message I'd want to move on, rather kind of conclude with, which is, it's very important to understand that it's okay and it's healthy to have this whole gig thing in our minds. It's really fine. It's just part of who we are.
Just like we saw ancestrally, it's just part of who we are.
For sure. You have to really ask yourself those questions, and you need to know that if you're moving on from something, is there genuinely a good reason to it? Because the grass may potentially be greener, but it may not. But the only way you'll find out is if you water your own grass first.
Exactly right. On that note, we hope everyone, waters the grass where it should be watered, and, use this time to reflect on, are these thoughts you're having? Because potentially you are having these thoughts of wanting to jump ship or jump situation that you might be in. And just by asking these selves, whether this is rational to you, whether this craving that you're having is reasonable, is it going to impact your long-lasting happiness? Ask yourself those questions. Use this time as reflection, and that'll hopefully allow you to come to the realization as to what you should do, whether you should act on that impulse or whether it's just a fleeting moment. So on that note, we hope you guys could take a lot away from this episode. We really enjoyed recording this episode. And, if you did enjoy, feel free to rate it 5 stars or whatever you deem necessary, because it does help the show. It does help us grow and get our voices heard to other people that can benefit from hearing these things. And, if you've got a friend that you can think of that would also really like to hear from this and, take something away from this as well, share it with them, because that's what we're about here at Big Bros, just spreading that positivity and spreading those messages that are all important for all of us in our formative years and allowing us to all grow collectively together.
Amen, brother. Happy Tuesday, guys.
Happy Tuesday. See you next week.